Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And I just want to start by thanking the Minister for his comments about the importance of democracy and acknowledging his words to the effect that we can always do more to strengthen our democracy and make it better and work better for Canadians. Of course, I know the Minister will recall in the last Parliament, we had quite an extended conversation as a Parliament about how to improve Canada's democracy by looking at the way that Canadians vote through the special committee on electoral reform, which the structure of which was put forward by the NDP in Parliament. We're very happy to see it proceed, although we weren't very happy about the outcome, in the sense that we really did feel that the committee had managed, despite many challenges, to put a path forward. And we shared the disappointment of many Canadians when the government chose not to move forward on that. We did note with interest, however, that the Liberals on the committee had filed a report saying that we should have more consultation with Canadians on how we vote and how we can improve our democracy in that way. And many people in civil society, including Fair Vote, which is a well-established organization that advocates for voting reform, have proposed that we have a citizens' assembly at the federal level, given that partisans within Parliament weren't able to agree on a system. Perhaps we could break the logjam by leaving it to Canadian citizens to get together, get the best information on the various voting systems, and then make a concrete proposal on how Canada moves ahead. And it's in the spirit of that our leader, Jagmeet Singh, sent a letter to the Prime Minister on November 4th, asking for his support for the initiative of establishing just such a citizens' assembly. And it's in that spirit that I want to give notice of the following motion here at the Procedure and House Affairs Committee today. That pursuant to Standing Order 108.3A6, the committee undertake a study on the advisability of establishing a National Citizens' Assembly on electoral reform to make recommendations about how to improve Canada's electoral system, including the question of how Canadians elect members of Parliament and how the makeup of Parliament reflects the votes cast by Canadians. That the committee's study shall include an examination of A, the terms of reference for such an assembly, B, the composition of such an assembly, C, a timeline for the completion of such an assembly's work, D, public reporting requirements for such an assembly, E, the resources required to support the work of such an assembly, including measures to ensure comprehensive and effective citizen engagement throughout the process, F, any other matters the committee deems pertinent to voting reform, that the committee report back to the House no later than May 3rd, 2021, and that the committee's report either 1, recommend not to proceed with such an assembly, or 2, recommend to proceed with such an assembly and include a detailed plan for how to proceed that provides for the issues raised in items A to F. So I wanted to give that notice while you were here, Minister, in order to be able to benefit from your thoughts about how we might move forward with such an assembly, or how we might make good on the Liberal Party's own suggestion from the last Parliament that we continue to consult Canadians about the way that we vote. So if not a citizens' assembly, then what would that be? I know there are no resources set aside here in the estimates for that kind of consultation. So when might we hope also to see some financial resources dedicated to that
order.
Consultation?
Mr. Blaikie, yeah, the volume is going down a little bit. Mr. Clerk, if you could look into that as well, or Mr. Blaikie, I don't know, is your connection going in and out?
I don't know. Am I coming across better now?
You're good. Yeah, you're good.
Point of order.
It happened once before too. Oh, Mr. Gerritsen, yes.
Well, I mean, Mr. Blaikie even admitted in his remarks there that there's no money in this particular estimates for this. So I would respectfully suggest that this is outside of the scope of what we're discussing today. I'm sure the minister is very capable of answering this question, and he's probably chomping on the bit to get into it. But I do, think that it's important that we stick to the issue today, which is the main estimates and questions related to those. Mr. Blaikie said it himself. There's no money in the main estimates for this, so the fact that he's bringing this up seems to be out of order to me. But I'll let you decide, Madam Chair.
On that same point of order, Madam Chair, if I may. just to respond to the Liberals' defensive
and I've paused your time, Mr. Blaikie, a little while back because I was going to tell you that I was going to give you time to introduce this, or to put this motion on notice at the end of the meeting, and maybe perhaps I should have stated that at the beginning, but I wanted to see how the meeting goes and how much time you would have. So I have paused your time a little while back. I think that it isn't within the scope of the estimates right now, but it's still a fair point. I did sit on the electoral reform committee that traveled the country studying this very important issue with your colleague, Mr. Cullen. And we had a very good time hearing from Canadians about this very issue. As to whether it's relevant, you can make the statement that you wish, Mr. Blaikie, and perhaps we can see if Minister LeBlanc would be willing to share any of his ideas on the issue.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Chair. I think it's important to note, experienced parliamentarians, including the Minister himself, will know that decisions and conversations about the estimates are as much about what is not in them as they are about what is in them. And I've participated in many question and answer sessions with ministers about their estimates where we discuss decisions not to fund certain priorities. And so I think it is a legitimate question as to why there aren't resources for continuing to consult or to starting a meaningful consultation with Canadians about what our voting system is. And I think, when we talk about responsible government and governments having an answer for their spending decisions, they have to answer just as much for what they're not spending on than what they are spending on. And I'm sure, I would just say to Mr. Gerritsen, who might feel more passionate for my side of the issue here, where he, on the opposition bench, is questioning a Conservative government. Here in Manitoba, we have a Conservative government that is not spending money that they should on the pandemic. And I'm sure Mr. Gerritsen isn't implying that members of the Manitoba legislature shouldn't be able to challenge the government about pandemic spending that they're not making, simply because the government hasn't made a proposal to spend money that they're not going to spend. So we have to be able to talk about spending in general. And I think it's a fair point why, particularly because we are also discussing the main estimates, not just the supplementary estimates, why funding for this initiative isn't there. So that is my defense of why I think this is quite relevant. And I'll just end by saying I look very much forward to the minister's answer.
Minister, would you like to share your comments and feedback on that issue?
Of course, Madam Chair, and thank you for the opportunity, and thank you, Mr. Blaikie, for raising obviously a critical issue, the idea of consulting Canadians on ways to improve our democracy, ways to improve the participation of Canadians. It's something we should constantly be focused on. You can imagine the context of COVID presents in and of itself something that we need to be very aware of. So I don't propose, Madam Chair, to have a view on the agenda of your committee and how you will choose to organize your meetings. Your committee properly has the mandate to look at issues around elections, the Elections Act, voting, and I would certainly see that as a very appropriate forum to begin this conversation should your committee take up Mr. Blaikie's motion. Obviously, I would, as the minister responsible for Elections Canada, but with the help of Privy Council officials, be happy to provide whatever information we might have that might be useful should your committee decide to take up that issue. In terms of what might be in future spending estimates, we'll let the Minister of Finance and the President of the Treasury Board work on those. But I do want to conclude, Madam Chair, by saluting Mr. Blaikie's service in Parliament. I was a fan of your father's, Daniel. I was a fan of your father's service as a long-standing member of Parliament. There's a small sort of group of us that you would be in the group. I might be. The Prime Minister himself is. Jeff Regan is, who are lucky enough to serve in an institution where our parents served. And I remember fondly your father's service, and it's particularly a pleasure for me to see you at the committee this morning. But to see you, I haven't had a chance because in the House of Commons, we don't tend to cross over the aisle and talk to colleagues in a cheerful way as you might do, sit next to one another in a desk. But it's a privilege for me to see you here this morning, but to see you also serving in the House of Commons.
Well, thank you very much. I look forward to continuing to work with you and hopefully working towards establishing a citizens' assembly at the federal level for voting reform.
Madam Chair, I would just point out that I neglected to mention this. The Acadian people in New Brunswick have a number of institutions that have grown over the decades, going back hundreds of years, that all properly started with citizens' assemblies. That's how we adopted the Acadian flag. That's how La Société Nationale d'Acadie was born. So there are great examples where the Acadian populations from Atlantic provinces and Quebec have used citizens' assemblies to push forward not only our rights but issues important to Acadians. So I'm particularly sensitive to that forum. So thank you, Mr. Blaikie.